All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Jennifer Hashley and I'm the director of the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. And I'd like to welcome you to our Agriculture Technology Platforms and Online Software to Manage Risks workshop series that is sponsored by the Northeast Extension Risk Management Education and USDA's National Institute for Food and Agriculture program. So I wanted to encourage everyone to introduce themselves in the chat. So you're welcome to share your name and where you're coming from tonight. If you want to share your farm name and your pronouns, that would be great. And if you'd like to rename yourself, you're welcome to do that as well, so that as we do question and answers later on in the evening, we can, call you by your name as you're answering questions. So just to start, I'd like to share with people a little bit about the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project and who we are and why we're hosting this workshop series. So I'll go through this a little bit quickly, but again, introductions, if you want to rename yourselves, add your pronouns to your name or add yourself to the chat. And then if folks can just kind of stay muted until we do the Q&A session, either toward the end or maybe between speakers, but definitely please add any questions that you have. If something comes up for you during the presentation and you have a question, definitely put it in the chat and I'll be monitoring that as we go through. So if it seems really pressing, I might interrupt the speaker and ask them to answer it. Otherwise, we'll wait till the end, but don't be shy about using the chat feature for that. And as you probably heard, the session is recorded. We will be posting it to the website afterward if you want to go back and listen to anything that you might want to revisit again or miss something if you have to step away. And you're welcome to leave your video on. That way the speakers can kind of see who they're presenting to, which is kind of nice. But if you have low bandwidth issues or prefer to keep it off since we're being recorded, feel free to do what's most comfortable for you. So just a little bit about New Entry. Our mission is to help improve our local and regional food systems by training the next generation of farmers. So we're a beginning farmer training program. And we really want to help folks that are interested in agricultural careers be able to grow food that feeds our communities and make that available to everyone. So that's really the core of what we do. And we do that through three main program areas, through our farmer training programs. And this workshop series is a part of that. We run a food hub, which helps aggregate and distribute the products that our farmers grow. And we do some national capacity building work with other beginning farmer training programs across the country. So just a little bit of detail about the kind of workshops that we do. If this is your first time participating in a New Entry event, we also do regular Explore Farming workshops, business planning courses. We do a crop production course and other, kind of different workshops throughout the year on topics like ag technology and food safety and direct marketing and all kinds of things. And we run an incubator farm program. So our crop production course, if any of you are interested, it's 3 weeks. 3 5-week sessions. It'll start up again next May. It's hands-on on our incubator farm here in Beverly, Massachusetts, which is north of Boston. We also have an online component to that. It is really designed as an experiential course, but during COVID, the last 2 seasons, we've done it online. So if you are far away, you're still welcome to join in. But we also have a 3/4 acre demonstration plot here that folks can get some hands-on practical skills with that. So check out our website if you're interested in that course. And then we run our farm business planning course. We're currently in the middle of our fall session course, but if any of you are interested in developing a first-year startup business plan, you're welcome to enroll in our January start date, which will begin Tuesday, January 4th. So I encourage you to check that out. And we also have a virtual farm tour. If you'd like to really learn a lot more about New Entry, you can check out some of our videos and other trainings and hear from our farmers on our YouTube channel. And then just a little bit about our CSA and Food Hub program. Again, we run a community supported agriculture program. We do some food access work, and we really look at our Food Hub as a market-based training program. So folks that are selling on, that are farming on the incubator are welcome to use that as one of their marketing outlets. And then, as I mentioned, we do some national programming as well to help other beginning farmer programs run good quality beginning farmer and experiential training across the country. So that's a little bit about us. For those of you who may have registered for multiple workshops, that's great. The way that we're thinking about this risk management workshop series is we're bucketing them into risk management categories and really trying to focus on online resources, technology, and software programs that can help you manage risks. So the first few sessions beginning this evening is really focused on legal risk. And we have somewhat of a farmland focus with the technology and software platforms, which we'll hear more about in depth around farmland acquisition and financing and financial calculators and build a lease tools and all kinds of things in the next couple of sessions. So tonight we're really going to just explore kind of an overview of legal resources and services and do a little bit of a dive into some communication resources so that when you think about all of the other topics of risk that we're going to work on, you can kind of draw back onto that legal toolbox that you're going to learn from this evening. And then as we get into December and early January, we're going to move into our financial risk workshops and kind of dive into some of the record keeping tools and software, from QuickBooks to FarmOS and FarmBright and point of sale applications and things like that, so you can make good financial decisions on your farm. And then we will be working on production risk and talking about some of the production record keeping software for enterprise budgeting and tracking tools for soil health and organic certification. And then we move into our marketing risk platforms. And there's so much there with online sales and e-commerce and all these programs that help you connect to consumers. We're going to hear from those companies. And throughout the series, we will be having farmer presenters share their direct experience using these programs, the good, the bad, the ugly, the challenges, the opportunities, and ways that they've helped them grow their businesses. All of the resources throughout this 12-session series will be posted to this website on our website. And to get there, you can navigate to our top toolbar to the resources section under the Farmer Resource Library. There's another sidebar there where we will house all of the resources from this series. So the workshop recordings, any handouts that speakers have, or links to websites or resources will be housed here after the session. So if you miss any of them or aren't able to attend, you're welcome to come here and you'll see those posted. So I just want to say thanks to our funder again for supporting this workshop series. That is why it is free. And there is no such thing as a free lunch. So the funder does require that we do, we had you fill out kind of a lot of demographics and the registration form. They really want to understand that we are imparting knowledge and that you are either assessing, analyzing, putting into practice the knowledge that you gained. So I'm going to launch a short poll really quickly. We'll do a quick poll at the beginning of the workshop now, and then at the end to rate your knowledge gain. Hopefully there is some. Don't feel like you have to say that, be honest. And then I'll probably send a quick little just workshop evaluation to you afterward. It should just be a couple questions like, what did you like about this? What could we improve for future presentations to share with the presenters? And then 6 months from now, or maybe 4 months from now, the funders would also like us to do a pre-post, like, was there, now that you had time to reflect on the information, did you actually make any changes to your business as a result? So it'll be kind of a post-workshop series evaluation. And I'll send that out either sometime in March or a little bit after, before the season gets too busy. So just know that's coming. I know it sounds like a lot. Hopefully they'll just be quick and painless, but we'd really appreciate it to be able to report on the value of this back to the funder. And so right now I'm going to stop. I think I can launch the poll while I'm sharing my screen, but I'm going to launch the first poll. Very quick question. Hopefully you can see that. You can just take a minute or two to rate your knowledge about legal risk. And we haven't even defined what legal risk means yet, but would you rate yourself as one is no knowledge, or do you feel like you are an expert level knowledge around legal risks? So. All right. I think we've got almost everybody who's on the call participating. So I'll end that poll. Thank you. And one more quick poll. I'm just wondering if folks can weigh in here. Which areas of legal risk are you most familiar with? And you can choose all that apply. And again, I'm sorry, we haven't defined these yet, but that's okay. Which of these do you feel like you know the most about? Great. All right. Well, that is all I have for now. So I'm going to stop the poll. Thank you all for responding there. And just wanted to do a quick introduction about tonight's sessions and introduce our speakers, and then we'll get right to it. So tonight we're going to kind of present a farmer's legal toolkit and learn a lot here from both Sarah, who's from Farm Commons, and Mary Egan, who is from the Conservation Law Foundation's Legal Food Hub. And their bios are here. I'd like to, I'll read them for you, but you're also welcome to read along. But Sarah will be speaking first, and she joined the Farm Commons team in 2018 and was prior to that a staff attorney for Core Resilience. And she's been a licensed attorney from Oregon since 2007 and has gained experience practicing law in a diversity of areas, and is super excited to now be working in the food and farming field. But she graduated from Pace University School of Law and Indiana University and lives in Southern Oregon with her 2 sons. And then after Sarah goes, you'll hear from Mary, and she's the regional program coordinator for the Legal Food Hub. And she was most recently employed at the Harvard Business School as a project coordinator and has done a lot of work in public health and at Mass General as a database manager. And she brings a lot of great experience to the team. She's worked on farms and started her own dried fruit business. And I love the name, Cut&Dried. So really excited, and thank you both for being here. Really appreciate it. And I will turn it over to Sarah to get us started.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Okay, I will work on sharing my screen here. Okay, we good? Can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Great, okay. Well, thanks for having Farm Commons and me here tonight. Jennifer already told you a little bit about me, so I won't stick on this slide here too long, but I'm out in Oregon, like she said, so other end of the country from y'all, and I love food and farming, and I have actually 8 chickens now instead of 4. I don't have a farm, but I aspire to be one, although it's very hard to even keep up with my tiny little garden and fruit trees, but someday we shall see. I now work with Farm Commons. I've been here for 3 years, and like Jennifer said, I've been doing a variety of work since 2007 when I graduated from law school in so many different areas, but really my heart and soul is in farming and food. And so I'm very happy to be here at Farm Commons, where I can dig into the complexities of farm law and try and translate them, because it is like speaking a foreign language, into useful, hopefully, and accessible information for everybody. So a little bit more about Farm Commons. This is our mission. So we empower farmers to understand and solve their farm business law issues within an ecosystem of support. We've been around for, I think, about 7 years now. We have a staff of 5 nationwide, and Farm Commons has received 2 fellowships and nearly $1 million in federal grants, which covers 2/3 of all of our revenue. We also have foundational support and some earned revenue. We don't make money on legal services, so you can't hire us as your attorneys, and that's why you can trust us for objective legal information. So how do we achieve this mission? We do this through what we're doing today: trainings, workshops, webinars, podcasts, and a huge library of written materials on our online library. And we also bring farmers together through something called the Community Commons. And this is an online forum also on our website. This is where producers can ask each other questions like, what's the best insurance provider in West Virginia? Or if I'm in Arizona, how do I set up an LLC? How do I get workers' compensation if I'm in New Hampshire? So we have a membership program for both farmers and farm service providers, and this connects members to this whole world of resources. So membership is what makes it possible for us to provide all these resources. So take a look at our offerings and see if it might be right for you. So farm law education. What is this all about? Farm law education can build stronger communities. We're talking about risk reduction, better relationships, and sounds strange, but joy. Yeah, seriously, joy. Joy of common purpose, of belonging and participation in our community. But that's all to come. So in the meantime, the research shows that we as humans are more likely to take action to avoid something terrible instead of to gain some kind of advantage. So on to the scary stuff. So 51% of farmers are vulnerable to losing a lease within a year. And this is based on research that we've conducted at Farm Commons. But we can fix this. And the solution to many of our legal vulnerabilities, like the leasing issue, isn't necessarily in knowing more law. It's actually in developing stronger relationships. So here tonight, in the brief time we have together, I'll try and show you why and how. So let's just start off with a story. And because we're on this fear theme, let's tell a little bit of a scary story. So this story is about Farmer Sam. And Farmer Sam was growing garlic seed as a way to raise capital for his own vegetable farm that he planned to start in the fall. He put $30,000 worth of garlic seed in the ground, which wasn't going to be ready to harvest until next summer. Then on November 30th, Farmer Sam gets a call from his landlord. His landlord was in the process of selling the property and wanted to let Sam know that the lease wouldn't be renewed for the coming summer. And Sam totally panicked. This is the scary part. Understandably, would he be left without any access to the land or the incredibly valuable crop he'd planted a few months ago? In the midst of his panicking, Farmer Sam called Farm Commons, and this is a true story. It's not, we've changed Sam's name for privacy, but this really happened. So he needed answers, and he assumed that the law would define what was fair in this situation, right? So unfortunately, reality was different. So the first question we had for Sam at Farm Commons was, okay, so tell me what you and the landlord agreed to as to when and how the lease would renew from year to year. So what do you think Sam said? Right. Sam and the landowner hadn't agreed to anything, of course. They hadn't talked about renewal. The issue just hadn't come up. So unfortunately, that meant that Sam was vulnerable to default state laws. The surprising thing to many farmers is that the first source of authority for what is fair in a situation like this isn't statutes or regulations. It's the agreement of the farmer and the landowner. The law really does want to honor the agreement of these folks, first and foremost. It's usually only when the landlord and the tenant fail to come up with their own agreement that state law will kick in. So the bad news for Sam in this case was that default state laws weren't really written for garlic producers. They were written more for commodity style farmers, right? So unfortunately, Sam didn't have a lot of ground to stand on in terms of keeping access to his garlic crop. And this is a dark story for Sam, but it does have a silver lining for you all. So farmers have power. They can create agreements that suit their operations and see those agreements protected in court. If they take the time to craft creative solutions that work for their unique farm businesses, the law will be there to back them up. So I wanted to lead with this story because it really does illustrate a theme that will come up again and again. If they didn't create a plan, the state has one for them, but they're probably not going to like it. So let's review the moral of the Sam story. So generally speaking, state law on land leasing serves as a backstop for when farm tenants or landlords don't come up with their own agreement together. And farm businesses are most resilient when they have thorough discussions with landlords and tenants about the particulars of their arrangement. So moving forward, know that knowing more laws doesn't necessarily make us more resilient, like I said. Preventing issues from ever developing does make us all as farmers more resilient. So I really want you to walk out of here knowing that state laws that address leasing land are generally just a backstop that fills in when necessary, when tenants and landlords don't come up with their own agreement. Too often, farmers use state law to discover if farmers like Sam have a sliver of hope left, or if they're just totally kind of screwed. So let's shift our focus. Let's prevent situations like Sam's from ever happening. If we're going to prevent such scary situations, what do? Well, we need to talk to each other. Landlords and tenants need to talk to each other about all these important issues. They need to talk about things like who are the parties? Where is this happening? What property are we talking about? When? What is our beginning lease date? What is the end date? What can we do on the premises? What are the limitations? Can we do on farm sales? What about agritourism, corn mazes, that kind of thing? What about camping? Are certain agricultural operations not allowed? Can we not do livestock? What about processing chickens? Is that okay? We need to know if we have access to infrastructure, electricity, trash, storage, irrigation, internet, all that stuff. We have to talk about this. What happens if things get ruined? What happens if facilities are damaged or destroyed? Who fixes them? What if we break tools, tractors? Who's responsible for that? What can we build? What can we do in terms of improvements? What about repairs? What about fences and hoop houses? If I put that up as a tenant, a farm tenant, and I'm asked to leave, what happens to that investment? Do I just eat it and walk away? What happens if and when this leasing relationship comes to an end? So all of these are really important questions to ask. Obviously, things like how do we resolve issues? What are the payment terms? And when do we renew our lease? All of that is essential to talk about. And on our website, we have a long list. We have a document that's very helpful that gives you a list of all the questions that landlords and tenants should ask about when negotiating a farm lease. And we also have a model lease agreement that's very helpful in developing your own farm lease. Of course, it's really easy for me to rattle off a list of things that you should talk about with your landlord, but make no mistake, I know how truly hard it actually is to have these conversations. It's so much easier to rely entirely on an attorney or a template lease for the answers, but that's not necessarily where true resilience lies. Those things are helpful, they're great, and they definitely have a place, but you have to talk about what works for you and create a unique lease that makes sense for your situation. So just because a solution works for other farmers, maybe they have a great lease they've used, doesn't mean that that's going to work for your farm. And this investment in communication will yield dividends when you're able to create authentic solutions that really work for you. But how do you actually have these difficult but critical conversations with business partners, landlords, tenants? Well, compassionate communication is one very helpful strategy that we learned about at Farm Commons and that we teach our farmers participating in our farm law workshops. So it's also called nonviolent communication. And this method of communication can be applied in the farmland context great when discussing all kinds of important agreements between tenants, landlords, lenders, anyone. So let's get to a story and see in practice how it could be useful. So let's meet farmer Sophie. Sophie is leasing farmland property with a house that she lives in. And on the farm, she grows produce for farmers markets and chefs. She has a written lease agreement with the landlord, and in their lease, they agreed that the landlord will mow the grounds to keep the property looking good, which also relieves Sophie of this chore while maintaining the property for her customers to enjoy. When Sophie moved in, she and the landlord discussed schedules, and they agreed that Tuesdays would be the very best day of the week for the landlord to come in and mow. Sophie organized her business schedule around Tuesdays, noting it down as a maintenance day. And for the first 6 months of the lease, this worked great. The landlord came out on Tuesdays to mow. Everything was going great. She got to focus on growing her farm business, and the landlord got some exercise maintaining the grounds, and the farm property looked really good for farm guests and customers. But as it happens, things changed. The landlord became a primary caretaker for his grandchild. And because of this, his schedule became irregular, and he started coming out to the farm basically whenever he could. So one week he came out on a Wednesday during CSA pickup time, and he was mowing and he kicked up grass all over the customers' parked cars. The next week, he came out on a Monday while Sophie was giving a tour of her farm to a group of customers, community members, and her local extension agent. While the landlord was mowing, the noise disrupted Sophie while she was trying to answer questions about her farm operation. And then the week after that, the landlord came out on a Saturday while Sophie was at market. While he was at it, the mower broke down and needed repair. He called Sophie to let her know that a repair person was coming to the property, and he left the gate open. Sophie got the message and felt very anxious about being away from the farm and her home with the gate wide open, as she still had hours of the market to go. So as you can imagine, tensions were rising as the schedules began to conflict. Each of these situations on their own are not big issues, but altogether, they really do start to add up. Frustration, overwhelm, resentment. That's what Sophie was feeling. And as the weeks went on and the mowing schedule became more and more erratic, she found herself feeling more and more frustrated and overwhelmed. So at Farm Commons, we emphasize writing agreements down. And that's really good advice. And we'll get into that. Why? We'll tell you why it's so important. But at this point, what use is that for Sophie now? The landlord wasn't following the lease. They had something in writing. They still weren't following. He wasn't following the lease. So what happens? Does Sophie put her foot down and say, hey, we had an agreement. I'm going to take you to court. Well, they could, but is there a better option? You know, despite the best leases, things still happen, and true legal resilience is being prepared to address them. So it's impossible, no matter how much you talk about it beforehand, to anticipate everything that might come up or write every minute detail into the lease. So let's talk about addressing Sophie's issues connected to her written lease. What could she do? The real legal question here is, how should the maintenance be taken care of moving forward? And to answer that question, Sophie will have to talk to her landlord. But what should she say? Should she demand a return to the Tuesday maintenance schedule they agreed to in the lease? What if he can't? Or should she offer to do the mowing herself? This would require her taking the time to learn to use the mower and also spend 4 to 5 hours every week doing the chore that their lease agreement says the landlord will take care of. Is he going to pay her to do this now? All these questions were floating around Sophie's head, and she had no answers. Because getting to an answer for moving forward requires her landlord's participation in the conversation. Coming to an agreement on how to move forward here will require engaging in a conversation where needs and goals are clearly articulated, while creating space for the other person to hear those needs and also share their own. The conversation can either be really constructive, leading towards a solution for Sophie's business and the landlord's own scheduling needs, or it could be really destructive, causing the landlord-tenant relationship to completely break down. Sophie and the landlord have the power to decide which way their conversation goes. So back to Sophie. She's got to figure out a way to open up the conversation with her landlord. She can approach the conversation with compassionate communication, which is a practical skill for discussing issues with the goal of resolution. Compassionate communication is a 4-part framework, also known, like I said, as nonviolent communication. You can use it when engaging in important conversations, like discussing a lease or a purchase agreement or a promissory note. The framework guides us in reframing how we, number 1, express ourselves, and number 2, really listen to other people. It's rooted in empathy or seeing through other people's eyes. When we focus on listening and strive to understand rather than to convince, we can realize shared values and reach common ground. So here's how it works. The 4 steps of compassionate communication are: number 1, observation; number 2, feelings; number 3, needs; and number 4, requests. We begin by asking ourselves to describe the facts of what happened, free of judgment or blame. In other words, what did I observe? What might the other person have observed? And then we identify feelings that arise as a result of what happened. What am I feeling? What might the other person be feeling? Next is to recognize that every feeling is the result of an unmet need. So what are the unmet needs underlying the feelings here? What is of utter importance to each of us? What are my needs? Or perhaps better understood as longings or values. What might be the other person's needs or values? So once we step back and really understand all of this with curiosity and compassion and care, we can then begin to identify strategies and solutions that fulfill both of our needs. And this is when we ask, what concrete, doable requests can we ask of each other? So when Sophie works through these 4 steps, she lands on this statement. When you come to the farm on different days, landlord, I feel anxious. So that's the observation part. I feel anxious because I need stability in my schedule in order to get farm work done. Would you be willing to put in place an advanced notice system for maintenance visits to the farm? That's her request. Farmer Sophie clearly articulates here that she's noticed a change in the mowing schedule and she's feeling anxious because she's lost stability in her farm work schedule. She then makes a request, free of demand, to come to a solution together for moving forward. You might be thinking, this sounds really great in theory, but how does it actually work? You might also be thinking that this approach seems awkward, scripted, and cumbersome. The truth is that, yeah, it can be, but with practice, it will start to feel more authentic and aligned with your own personal communication style. So, it's taken me a while to get here to this point, but another point really important to make, put your lease in writing. Why? Because it helps our memories. We often forget what we talked about. So all of this compassionate communication, really great tools, always something to strive for, but sometimes even that doesn't work. And it's really important to have your lease written down. And here's why. Like I said, it helps your memory because we often forget what we talked about. And also when you write something down, it creates a lot more clarity for you in your mind. Sometimes when we work together verbally, we think we're using the same words. Only when things get on paper do we realize that it wasn't as clear as we thought. So you can say something like, you can use that part of the pole barn, the part you were already using. Which part of the pole barn do we mean when we put it in writing? How are each of us perceiving the part we're already using? And here's a big one. When you put it in writing, you're able to enforce it. So most farmers and landowners would much rather prefer to go on hating each other forever than go to court over a lease. So going to court and winning isn't necessarily a victory. But it's really important to know that if you need that, it's there. If Sophie couldn't work anything out through the compassionate communication route, at least she would have had her lease in writing and she'd be able to go to court and get that maintenance schedule enforced. And even when you have everything in writing and you have an attorney who's reviewed it, things can still go wrong. It's always wise to reflect on your level of vulnerability. Are you planning to quit your job and buy 30 head of dairy cattle? What's your plan B if it doesn't work out? A measure of thinking and preparation beforehand can save us a lot of heartache if things go wrong. So none of this is to say you shouldn't start that dairy farm or that your plans are doomed. They aren't. We believe in your ability, but it's our job here at Farm Commons to help you see risk and identify strategies to mitigate it. And if things do go wrong, I want to emphasize the importance of talking with an attorney sooner rather than later. Time-sensitive things may need to be done to protect your ability to recover for losses. So definitely ask around and find an attorney if you're in a situation where your legal rights are really compromised and you need it. So on to that piece about finding an attorney. I'm going to hand it over to Mary here to talk about the Legal Food Hub. Unless there are any questions. I don't know if it's a good time to break for that now, but if there are, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can go on over to Mary.
My question is, are we gonna guys send all this information in through to our email or
Yes, I will follow up tomorrow once the recording is processed and I have a link to that. I'm happy to send you a link to the recording of the session and then also to some of Sarah, I don't know if there's a particular guide you would like me to share or just point people to the website. What would be the best way to follow up with some of the resources that you were talking about?
I'm going to check with Rachel. We've got, so our materials on our website, some of them are free and accessible even if you're not a member. Some of them require membership. So let me check in and see what we can offer. I would love to be able to get that resource that has the list of questions to ask each other when you're entering into a lease. And I'm not positive off the top of my head if that's a free resource or not, and maybe we can pass that along anyway. I'd love to be able to get that to you all. So I'll check in.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before Mary takes over? And thank you so much, Sarah. That was great. I learned a lot as well, and I can totally relate when situations go south. So I liked all of your suggestions.
You're welcome. Yeah. Talk about it and write it down and have an attorney on hand just in case.
Yeah. Great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, very, very clever handoff, Sarah. I like that. We're huge fans of Farm Commons over at the Legal Food Hub. They just have a wealth of knowledge on their team. They're all great teachers and instructors. So like just an awesome resource. So I'm so stoked you all got to hear about her and what Farm Commons offers. Definitely encourage you to reach out to their site and take a look. Let me share my screen. Oh, that's funny. That's my husband. Sorry. All right. This should be good now, right? Can I go?
I think you're not in presenter mode yet.
Yeah, that's funny. I did it. I changed something last minute. So let me go this method. Now you're good, right?
Yeah, that looks great. Perfect.
Thanks, Jennifer. So as Jennifer mentioned earlier, I'm the program coordinator for the Legal Food Hub, which is a project of Conservation Law Foundation. So our parent company, Conservation Law Foundation, is a whole bunch of attorneys that advocate for the environment through policies, policy changes, through litigation, things like that. And a couple of years ago, they started the Legal Food Hub as a way to support our local farmers in New England and sustainable farming and just the food system in general. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this project that they started. The easiest way to describe it is to think of us as a matchmaking service or a clearinghouse. So we work to connect farmers, food entrepreneurs, and food-related nonprofits to attorneys who are willing to help them with their legal questions and legal projects. So in all of New England, we provide our service, which is really great, just recently launched in New Hampshire. And what we've done is build up a network of attorneys in each of those states who have agreed to be on our list of people we can call. If Farmer Dave calls us with X issue, I can then reach out to 10 plus attorneys that have the skill set he needs and find someone that's willing to support Farmer Dave. The silver lining or the cherry on top to all of this is that these attorneys are willing to help farmers, food entrepreneurs, and nonprofits, all for free, or pro bono is the legal term used. So we guarantee that you will be connected to a really kind and supportive and helpful attorney. They may not always know agricultural law. Sometimes they're taking these projects on to learn something new themselves. But we have a really awesome network of attorneys in each of the states who really enjoy taking cases from us and supporting the local food system through the hub. So that's our primary work, is this matchmaking service. And then we also have a resource library that I'll show you all later that we've tried to create as a baseline information for legal issues. It pales in comparison to what Farm Commons has on their website, let's be honest. But these resources are totally there as a secondary option to what Farm Commons can offer. So I just wanted to, well, first let me offer a disclaimer. I'm about 8 months pregnant. And so if I sound out of breath, I am, but I'm okay. And I will be able to keep talking, but I'm okay. So I just want to talk through the kind of step-by-step how this process works for getting connected to an attorney when you need one. So the best way to reach out to us is either calling us, emailing us, or filling out an application on our website, which I'll show you guys later. And then I'm the person who receives it. And I generally reach back out either via email or phone, whichever one I have of yours. And I set up a phone call with you. And we just spend 15 to 20 minutes chatting about the legal questions you have, the project you're working on. And I also confirm your eligibility. We do have eligibility guidelines that I'll talk about in a minute. And then once I've collected all the information I have, and we know that you qualify for these pro bono legal services, I begin the outreach to the appropriate attorneys who can help you. So we email our attorneys one by one. We have great personal relationships with a lot of different firms and areas. And once we find an attorney who's willing to assist, I send an introductory email between you and the attorney. And that introductory email is meant to kick off the project, and then you and the attorney work directly together. And I come out as the middleman. So I'll check in and make sure things are going well, but the goal is that you work directly with that attorney to resolve your legal questions and issues. Our project does not intend that this pro bono relationship lasts forever. There is supposed to be a finite end. So you'll get this attorney, and that attorney has a sense of exactly what they're helping you with. And then once all those questions are answered, or once that project is wrapped up, you and the attorney would part ways, or work out a payment system for the next project. Or you can come back through the hub another time, and if you still qualify, we can reconnect you to another attorney, which is great. So we have no cap on how many times you can use the hub. So as I mentioned, there are some eligibility requirements for participants to get this free legal service. For farmers and food entrepreneurs, your net income has to be less than 30,000 for the business. So the business net income has to be less than 30,000. You have to also be a new business or starting to make about 5,000. But the point of this requirement is that you're not a hobby farmer, but that you're building a business. So if you're not making 5,000 net, that's okay. If you're just about to sign a lease so you could start your business, that's okay as well. We'll definitely accept you. But like I said, the goal is to support farmers who are really trying to start a business, not just grow food to give to their neighbors or sell to their neighbors. We'll also double check your household income. And it's a yes or no question. We don't ask for proof of paperwork. But we look at the federal poverty level, and if you're earning less than 400% of that in your household, you qualify for the services as well. We have a chart on our website. We go over all that stuff. And then nonprofits, obviously this group doesn't matter to you guys, but nonprofits automatically qualify if they're contributing to the food system in some way. And then our food entrepreneurs have to be using at least one locally grown ingredient to New England. But for farmers, you have to be growing a food item, at least one, if not two. And then we'll review your income, both household and business, to make sure you qualify. So some common legal issues that farmers come to us with are contracts. So it could be a contract between you and a business partner. It could be a contract between you and, kind of an example is a lease as well is considered a contract, but land leases, let's say you need someone to review your land lease, you can totally come to us to get an attorney to review that land lease with you so that you know exactly what's in it and potentially help you negotiate if it doesn't quite agree with your situation. Let's say you're also at the point where you have had your business going for about a year and you're feeling really good and you want to make an official entity or an LLC. Feel free to come to us to get an attorney to help you go through that process of filing for an LLC. Usually that involves writing an operating agreement between business partners. And as Sarah pointed out, like the more things that can be discussed and written down ahead of time, especially for business partners, the much smoother the partnership can run, right? Questions can all get answered up front of how are we going to be business partners. So entity formation is a huge one that we help farmers with. Employment, if you're at the point where you're going to hire 1 to 2 employees, we have an attorney. We have attorneys who can assist that process and make sure you understand what's required of you as an employer. And of course, trademark, food safety, other things. But farmers, we most often see asking us for assistance with contracts and with entity formations, with real estate and land leases. But come to us for anything and we'll see if it's a good fit. So just to give you brief statistics of how we're doing as a hub, like I said, we're finally just launched in New Hampshire. But in total, we're in our 9th year of operation. So we've been kind of a slow growing project, but we've placed about 686 cases throughout New England over that time. And we've got about 175 firms in the network across New England. And when we do the math, the rough math of how much money we've been able to save farmers and food entrepreneurs and nonprofits, it's roughly 3.8 million. So we're really proud of all these attorneys that have contributed so much time to supporting you all as farmers. And we want to continue making those connections so you guys are supported and so that our food system is supported. Just to give some brief examples and put some faces with cases. This is a dairy farmer, as well as she produces her own cheese in Maine, Crooked Face Creamery. She has a very cool story where she first came to the hub looking for assistance with the trademark process. And we connected her to an attorney. And then maybe 2 years later, she came to us with, a contracts question, like an agreement between her and a business partner. And she still qualified for the hub, and we were able to reconnect her to the same attorney. He's here in the picture with her. And so they worked together twice, and then she came to us a third time for, I think, a lease review. And unfortunately, but also fortunately, she'd financially graduated from pro bono legal services. Her business was doing really well, and so she no longer qualified for pro bono assistance, but she built this really great relationship with this attorney. And so now she has connected with him as a hired, like she'll hire him whenever she needs assistance. So through the hub, she was able to find a really great legal ally, which is cool to see. Then this farm is in Connecticut. The owners were transitioning off of this farm, and they were moving back to another farm that they'd been managing, and they wanted to transition the farm management and ownership to one of the farm managers of the existing Provider Farm. So this farm manager that was about to take over Provider Farm reached out to us for legal assistance to help with that business transition. And so she worked with an attorney throughout that whole process to make sure that all the paperwork was good and legal and clean in order for that transition to happen from one farmer to another farmer. Now, the last example I'll give is this ranch in Maine. He came to us, he's come to us now two times, and one time was he was having neighborly issues boundary issues with his neighbor and needed assistance navigating that relationship and coming to an agreement with how to handle the boundary. And then he just recently came to us with a request. He's considering partnering with some other farmers their businesses all complement each other. And so they're considering becoming more formal partners, and he wants to talk to an attorney about what that would look like for his current entity, Old Crow Ranch, and what that could mean, what a partnership with these other two would look like on paper. So the last thing I want to share is just our website, with the hope that our website and our resource library. So can you see this website here?
Yes.
That's great. Thanks, Jennifer. So our website's really basic, legalfoodhub.org. And the apply now button is right there. It's a brief, when you click on here, it's a very brief application, just name, demographic info, and what's your legal issue. But I wanted to definitely show you our resource library, which is accessed here. And our goal with this is so that you can read some materials prior to meeting with an attorney, so that you may have a better sense of the questions you need to be asking the attorney and the end results you're hoping for after you're interacting with the attorney. So for example, this category, starting and running a business, this guide in particular if you're looking to form an LLC, we'll talk you through that process. Some people do it on their own and it's super successful. Other people would prefer an attorney to talk them through the process. Either way is totally acceptable, and you can use us for an attorney. I also like this guide that I thought I'd show you. If you're at the point where you're trying to decide what kind of business structure to form for your farm, this is just one of those, like, you ask yourself the question, and then if the answer is yes, go this direction. Yes, no, right, go this direction. So this could be a really helpful tool as you're thinking about the future of your business. We also have about 15 guides in Spanish over here that you can access. So feel free to browse that at any point. All those guides are free. So the last thing I wanted to read is a quote or two from an attorney, just to emphasize how much our attorneys really enjoy supporting the local food system through the hub. Gonna read this one. Because of the nature of my practice, primarily litigation, so they deal with lawsuits and courts. I'm not likely to do a lot of work directly in this area. It's a great program and gives transactional attorneys pro bono opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. So litigators get a lot of pro bono work opportunities, but transactional attorneys, the ones that you'd be working with in the business area, they're looking for pro bono opportunities. So we have several attorneys that really appreciate getting the chance to work with farmers. And then we've been proud to participate in the Legal Food Hub program and appreciate all the work CLF does to administer this program and to support the development of sustainable, healthy regional food systems. So just letting you know, we got a lot of really great New England attorneys rooting for you all, wanting you to have successful businesses. So feel free to use us as a tool to access those attorneys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mary. That was great. And yeah, we are so fortunate in New England to have a resource like the Legal Food Hub. I know it's like a tool in our toolbox when we're working with beginning farmers, both to look at all the great resources that Farm Commons and educational program puts out, and then the great resources you just mentioned, and then to have the privilege of having an access to attorneys who want to do this work, I think is really amazing. So kudos to you guys for all your expansion in the region over time. And for those of you that live outside of New England, I don't know, Mary or Sarah, do you know of other similar networks in other parts of the country that are developing, or other pro bono legal support that farmers could tap into?
The only one I really know about is Pace Law School. That's where I went to law school. They have a food and beverage clinic. And so they also do pro bono work with farm and food businesses. And it is a needs-based application, I think. But that, again, that's just, I think, just New York. So probably some overlap there.
Great.
No, not from us at least.
Okay.
New York, yeah, we aren't launched in New York yet.
Okay.
But I think Sarah brings up a really good point that a lot of law clinics offer pro bono legal services. Whether or not they have the right specialty, you'll have to check, but that's such a good place to start for pro bono legal services is law school clinics.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then FLAG,
Farmers Legal Action Group in Minnesota.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's an option, right?
That's, yeah, although I'm not sure, I'm not positive what
They have a hotline, right? Or is that Farm Aid?
They do have a hotline, but I think it's for a very specific, I think it's for lending and discrimination in lending.
Okay.
And I don't know how far it reaches as far as other areas. They put out a lot of guides as well, but I don't know that they offer the same kind of services. Like you can get pro bono, representation from
Mhm.
them, but again, that would be just in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area.
Great. Do the participants that are on this webinar have questions that you'd like to ask Mary and Sarah? This is kind of time for us to open it up and answer any of the questions that we can about services or resources, or I don't know if we want to get into deep legal issues, but we'll take the questions as they come. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question if you have any, or you're welcome to put it in the chat as well. Or what are folks curious about that we didn't cover, I guess, in this session that you'd like to learn more about? Are folks able to unmute if you have a question? All right, thanks, Melanie. So Melanie is asking if we could get some examples of the different types of risk. Do either of you want to take that on?
Well, I suppose the one example, I mean, I talked about an example, which was poor farmer Sam. I think he kind of epitomizes the legal risk as a farmer, especially, you know, in land, you know, situations. Land matters. Farmer Sam planted garlic. The garlic wasn't going to be ready till the next summer. He didn't have a written lease, and the landlord was going to sell the property before next summer. So Sam was at risk of losing a $30,000 crop of garlic. So that's a real risk. You know, that is the type of risk that we're talking about. The type of vulnerabilities that farmers face is, it especially happens in the land, you know, within a context of land. Farmers need land to operate, and it's really hard to own it these days. I think you all know how expensive farmland is. And so leasing, about 40% of farmers lease land in the US. And I think that number is growing. So leasing tends to be kind of one of the best ways, or the easiest ways, to get on a piece of farmland. And unfortunately, when you're in a leasing situation, you're always kind of at the whim of the landowner. There's not a lot of security there. So I think anything where you're putting in a lot of investment, and of course, again, we see this a lot in the land situations, right? You're putting in hoop houses, you're building, you know, outbuildings, packing sheds, you're, you know, those things that are attached to the land. If you invest in them and then you're asked to leave, you know, what happens? You could potentially be out a lot of money. So, you know, I think that's a big problem. Another problem too is not just losing money, losing what you've invested in, put your money and your heart and soul in, but also, you know, losing out on opportunities. A lot of farmers who are leasing maybe don't buy the hoop house, or they don't build the packing shed because they don't own the property, and they fear that if they build those things, they might lose them. So they just end up not doing things and not taking advantage of opportunities they otherwise might if they own the land. So
like some he just like putting the garlic in the ground, and then should be harvested by middle of the summer, and the landowner starts selling the land. What way that he support there's any way that he could get back his money, or the landlord should be wait until he harvests the garlic, or which way that he's supposed to do now from there?
Yeah, maybe. It's all maybe, there's no guarantee, I guess, is the point. Sam would be at the mercy of the landowner, really. I mean, if they had a lease, or even if they didn't, Sam might be able to battle this out in court, and a judge might say, out of fairness, landlord, you have to pay Sam for the garlic that he lost. That's all possible. Sam might recover his money in the end, but what had to happen for him to get there? He had to probably hire a lawyer to help him through the court case. He had to take a lot of time out of his farming business to deal with the situation. So it's possible, but also that's really hard to be at the mercy of not just a landlord, but also a judge who's having a bad day. They don't always make great decisions. They make a lot of bad choices, and they're just humans after all. So you're putting your whole entire business, in the hands of another human, and that can be risky, or maybe a jury. If it's being tried before a jury of your peers, they're humans too, and they don't always make the right call, so that's the risk. Yeah, it's quite possible Sam and the landlord may very well be able to work something out. Maybe they have a good relationship, and maybe the landlord, through a conversation, through those compassionate communication tools, might be able to come to some resolution, but it's all just maybes. Would it be better if there was a written lease? Maybe, yeah. I mean, yes is the answer. There would be a lease that they could then, if they needed to, go to court and prove as evidence and say, this is, I had the right to be here for a whole other year, so writing it down so much helpful. It doesn't guarantee still, that things will go in your favor, but it's way more likely that it will.
Great, thank you. And
Thank you.
thanks,
Yeah.
Carolyn too, I think clarified, and Melanie agreed in the chat that I think she was also wondering about the legal risk management topics that were in my poll questions of like what might be some different examples of like regulatory risk, or I think, we were talking about leasing a lot, and that's a good example of like a business contract or contractual risk. And I think Mary, you mentioned a couple of types of transactional issues that the Legal Food Hub supports as well. But then there's, other categories of compliance risk or dispute risk. I think you were just also talking about if there's a dispute between, you gave the example with Sophie and her, landlord maintenance contract, like how do you manage those risks, or any other kind of non-contractual risks? So I was just trying to get a sense of, there are so many different legal risk topic areas. I don't know if either of you want to give some different examples of other things that have come up in your practice, or you've seen producers struggle with, that might be good examples just to help kind of put a finer point on what those different risk topics might include.
Yeah, I think another one that's probably worth mentioning is if you have either an employee or a volunteer that gets injured while they're on the farm, that's a scenario where hopefully you have insurance lined up to help support that injured employee. But that's something to think about with risk.
Yeah. Yeah, good. I'm glad you brought that up, Mary. I mean, on that note, regarding employees, yeah, so workers' compensation, really important to have if you have employees, and probably required, and required in a lot of states, not all, but for agricultural operations, but also just things like minimum wage and overtime laws. So employment laws are very strict, and if you break them, then there can be some major repercussions. So that's definitely a regulatory risk that's out there and very present. So, if a worker, maybe you have an intern, you're not paying them full, minimum wage, not paying overtime. And, again, there are exceptions in agriculture for minimum wage and overtime sometimes and in some situations, but it is possible that the intern gets, maybe they get into a situation where they're let go or they're asked to leave or something. These things break down relationships. It's all back to relationships. They break down. The disgruntled intern then goes to the state, files a claim for back wages and overtime pay. I've seen this happen where I live to farmers that I know, and it's, they just sit there writing checks to their attorney until it's settled. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Mary. Employment law is a huge area of legal risk. And then another one I'll share is in terms of regulatory risk is zoning. So zoning laws, every state, every county, every, area around the state and the country have their own zoning laws, which basically means, we're going to let these certain activities happen in these certain areas. So like farming is okay over here in the country, but not in the city. And there are different requirements and different limitations on what you can do on a farm. And so that happens a lot with farmers, for example, that start maybe an agritourism operation, or maybe they decide to have barn weddings. And then next thing you know, the neighbors complain. They don't like the sound. They don't like the traffic. They don't like the loud music. They complain to the zoning authority. And then the farmer is slapped with a fine, or maybe they're told they can't do that activity. And maybe the farmer's already invested in renovating their barn or developing a parking lot or infrastructure, for bathrooms or whatnot. So I think it all really comes down to the same issue. You don't want to be out there as a farmer having invested a lot of money and time in something without really knowing what the risks are. So that's what we talk about when we talk about vulnerability, and being resilient is really just having an understanding of all these laws. And then, just empowerment, just being educated about what the risks are, and then figuring out what you're comfortable with in terms of what risks you're willing to take.
You might be allowed to have chickens on your land, but not roosters. Definitely.
Yeah,
to that one.
definitely. Yeah. I have chickens in the city. I've got 8 chickens, but I'm sure if I had a rooster, I would have a zoning complaint immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even where I live, you have to have X amount of acres. I think I forget the number, but I think you have to have more than 3 acres in order to have a rooster on your property. Something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then things like, other regulatory, what were the other categories, Jennifer? Regulatory risk, contracts,
compliance, dispute risk. I just was kind of looking at different categories of risk, and this is sort of all under the legal framework. But I think, as you mentioned, there's like human resource risk, which is all the employment law, having employees, all of that. There's types of marketing risk, which could be food safety related, it could be insurance requirements, things like that. And then production risk too, which is kind of what farmers deal with all the time, the climate variability and all of that. Like, it's risky to grow crops and be subject to Mother Nature. So there's lots of different categories of risk. I think the different legal risk, this whole section of webinars is really focusing around legal. And I think the thing that comes up the most is like either the contractual piece, like lease agreements, or like you were saying, maybe even business and business formation, or regulatory risk, I think are the big ones in the legal categories, unless there are others you guys can think of that kind of fit those legal areas of risk. Anything becomes a legal risk, right? If someone's disgruntled about something, it seems to fall into the legal category.
Yeah, it's all about, the law is just a series of just agreements. We agree as a society that we're we're going to pass these laws and then we're going to abide by them. And we agree with, we create agreements with business partners and landlords and all kinds of people. And we say, this is how we're going to act together. And this is what we agree to do and not do. And all of that can break down. The problems happen when those agreements aren't held to, right? If you break a law that's on the books, or if you break a provision in your lease agreement, all that's where the real problems happen.
I think some things that are tricky for folks to understand too is like what's an implied contract and what's an explicit contract, right? I think, I was thinking as you were giving examples too, a lot of people have marketing agreements, or they are running a CSA program in a way that's, maybe not so explicit, maybe explicit, depending on how you structure your purchasing arrangement. But if someone's giving you $500 or $800 upfront at the start of the season with a promise that you're going to deliver vegetables every week for a certain amount of time, and you accept the money and cash the check, that's kind of a contract. But what if you have a terrible season? What if your farm gets flooded and your soil washes away, or you get into an accident and you can't farm? How do you, and you've already spent the money, or you've paid your workers, how do you give the money back? Or what right do your customers have to sue you for a product that you didn't deliver? There's all kinds of ways this could play out.
Yeah, that's a great example. We have a CSA workbook in a model agreement on our website for just that very issue, because that could be kind of a big deal. You assume, right? That's the implied part, that as a farmer, all these customers give you money at the start of the season for all this food that they're going to get in return. But is that their assumption too, that they're going to give it to you no matter what, even if everything fails, even if there's fire and flood and drought and there's nothing for them to offer?
No.
Yeah, so you can have contracts, as far as sales go, you're talking about implied contracts, just sales, there's a whole body of law around sales, and there's so much of it has to do with just how you acted. It doesn't matter if you have a contract necessarily, but if you continue to, cash the checks and deliver the produce, and, then a court might decide that there was a contract there, even though if there's nothing written down, there was a contract based on how the parties acted. So just a lot to think about. So communication, very helpful. Communication, relationships, having all of that being very clear and very open is going to prevent a lot of these misunderstandings and assumptions and legal problems down the line.
And I would say doing your homework too. I mean, I feel like obviously you all are very enlightened because you're here learning tonight. But sometimes we hear from farmers that it's well, how do I know what I don't know? Or how do I know that I'm doing something wrong? Because I'm farming, or I'm doing this, or, sometimes it's hard to even know that you're putting yourself at risk because you don't know all the ways that you could be not in compliance or not following a regulatory mandate, or, how do you find out about these things? How do you do your research and your homework? Obviously, coming to educational sessions is one, looking at all the resources on both of your websites and just educating yourself, talking to other farmers. Do you guys have other suggestions for folks that might be ways to learn more about what you might not know or what might not be obvious?
Besides trial and error.
Right. Finding out the hard way.
Right.
That's one way to do it.
I don't know.
I mean,
Is Mohammed
network.
trying to say something? Hang on, I think you're on mute, Mohammed.
Okay. What about if your neighbor start complaining about you? Maybe say they're a tractor making too much noise, or maybe your employer working the farm, they're making too much noise. So what are you gonna deal with that if that's things are happening like that for your neighbors start complaining such stuff?
Maybe bring them some zucchini. Invite them to your event.
Okay.
No, it's true. Butter them up so they don't feel like they need to be aggressive with you. You know?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
just an example, like I know I farm in Pennsylvania, like we're protected, I think under state law, like you can run a tractor 24/7, protected under agricultural law. Like your neighbors couldn't complain if you're running a tractor at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're exempt from that like noise complaint or whatever because of the agricultural law. But for example, like we have livestock guardian dogs and they don't qualify under agricultural law. So we have to bring them in at night because if our dogs are barking at night, our neighbors could complain and then take legal action against us. So I think that's something that like, if it's not a agreement that's made informally with your neighbors by bringing them zucchini or zucchini bread or whatever, then you should check like your state or your local laws about certain ordinances for like noise or agricultural compliance.
Yeah, that's helpful, Carolyn. Is that a right to farm law that you've got in
Yeah,
Pennsylvania?
it is a right to farm
Yeah.
law.
That's interesting, though, that you're not allowed to have livestock guardian dogs because our whole farm would never
Yeah.
exist without them. We have like
We can
1,400 chickens
have
that we
them.
fed.
It's just that if they were to make noise, like if they're barking at night, our neighbors are allowed to complain, and like that's not protected under right to farm because they're not like farm equipment. They're dogs. And like anybody can have a dog. You don't just need to have a dog or have a dog because you're a farmer. So it's not protected.
Wow.
Hmm.
But wouldn't they bark at night if there's a
Yeah, they do.
predator? I mean,
They
isn't that-
primarily bark
Right.
at night.
doesn't
That's
that mean
when
they're
you
doing
want
their
them to
job?
bark.
Good point.
Yeah, exactly. Which is frustrating, but like just what we have to do is like we bring them in at night to alleviate that problem. Keep them out as long as possible till last light, till the sun goes down, and then they come in for the night and then go back in. So it is inconvenient, but like our neighbors are very particular people, so they will complain. And to avoid that issue, to avoid that risk of possibly having somebody, you know, try to sue us or complain or have the police sent to our property, we just avoid that risk by taking like a preventative measure, knowing that our neighbors will complain for something that we're not protected from.
Wow.
Yeah, I think neighbor disputes can get complicated real fast, and it stinks for especially if one neighbor is a farmer and the other one's not. It can be really tricky. So I'll mention another resource that's available through the USDA. They have an agricultural mediation program. And so there's usually a couple mediators in each state, and it's a free service. But if you get to the point with your neighbor where you realize like you need an outside person to help navigate the conversation and control the conversation and have it be an efficient and effective conversation, the agricultural mediation program is there as a resource to help neighbor disputes. Yeah.
Is that a free resource, Mary?
Yeah. From what I understand, and Jennifer, you might be able to correct me, each state department has a list of qualifying qualifying issues that are free. So neighbor disputes might be a free service in Maine, but maybe not in another state. It's kind of state specific from what I understand. But in general, the ag mediation program is a free service. They just may not be able to cover all. They just can't always cover every dispute.
Yeah. Good to know. Yeah. And I think some of these, so many of these neighbor problems happen because of just a lack of understanding. And especially now with like, if you're in more of a, if you're up against an urban area, for example, or if you know, people don't necessarily understand farming that live in rural areas. They just are living in the country because they like the country, but they don't understand what farming is really about. So some of it, much of it is just, I think, just, you know, having conversations about like, this is farming, this is what it looks like, what are your you know, what are the issues, like what can we do to alleviate some of your problems with this, you know, see if there's anything that can be worked out, you know, on a person-to-person relationship level. But then also I'd say go and check out, like, do you have a right to farm law in your state, and what does that look like? So, you know your rights, know your neighbors, just be informed of.
Get to know your zoning board,
Yeah.
get to know your town council members, even like get on the good side of all the city employees.
And bring everyone food. Just
Yeah.
at the end of the day, just bring everyone food and make them happy.
Great. That was great advice. So I'm just going to share my screen and launch our final poll here because we're almost at time. Whoops, is that showing? There we go. So just wanted to thank Sarah and Mary. I feel like this was a great presentation and you shared a lot of knowledge and resources. And thank you all for asking really good questions and having good dialogue here. And I just have the one post-workshop poll, if you don't mind responding to that. Let me find it here. It's just sort of rating your knowledge about legal risks. So hopefully folks feel like they learned something, but feel free to be honest if you're kind of still where you were at the beginning. And yeah, we'll take a few minutes for that. And I would just encourage everybody, again, I'll send a follow-up email tomorrow. I'm not going to do it this evening, but I'll do that tomorrow and reference some of the resources that our speakers shared with us tonight, and I'll share the recording. So if you want to share it with any other colleagues or farmer friends that you know of that weren't able to listen tonight, and I will be posting it on our website as well. So you can always go back to that and find it there in the future also. And I will be sending a follow-up evaluation to you at some point. And we look forward to seeing you all again at future workshops as well. So again, we're doing this pretty much every Thursday, aside from holiday weeks, obviously not on Thanksgiving, but through consecutive Thursday evenings from 6 to 7:30 Eastern Standard Time on all the different topics that we talked about. So if there aren't any final questions, just wanted to again thank our presenters and thank all of you for attending, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.
I have a question quick before we sign out. I did not sign it all the workshop that we have. I just choose a couple. So if I wanted to attend all, will be possible for that, or just I should be only stay whatever I choose it to be attending the workshop?
Yeah, you're welcome to attend all of them. And you can just go back to the same registration link that you filled out the first time and click more of the dates. And then that kind of puts you in the registration links to the workshop sessions. And then I pull an attendance sheet to make sure you have the right Zoom link for that. So it's, if you want to just go back, I can send the registration link in the follow-up email again too, so you can go back and register for the other sessions that maybe you didn't check the first time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much again. This was great. I really got to learn a lot and appreciate all the information, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. And thanks again, Sarah and Mary, for spending the time with us.
Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you all.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Night.
Thank you.